At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, an HOA Karen made a $2.3 million mistake that would land her in federal prison for 8 years. And it all started with a pair of bolt cutters in the wrong military vehicle. Clang! The sound of those bolt cutters biting through my security chain echoed through perfect suburban silence like gunshots. That metallic snap was the moment Bethany Kensington Wright went from HOA president to federal felon in 30 seconds. See, while I was deployed overseas fighting drug cartels, this power-hungry suburban dictator decided my eyesore vehicle needed to disappear. What she didn't know, that Jeep belonged to a federal drug task force, was loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment, and I'm the kind of federal agent who specializes in taking down criminal organizations. She thought she was stealing some soldier's truck. She actually committed federal crimes that would make cartel bosses jealous. What would you do if some HOA tyrant messed with your property while you're serving overseas? Drop a flag emoji and tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how many patriots are out there. My name's Marcus Tank Rodriguez, and 3 months ago I thought inheriting my grandmother's house would be a blessing. Boy, was I wrong. Willowbrook Estates. Picture-perfect suburban hell where every house is the same shade of beige, sprinkler systems hiss on automated schedules, and the smell of fresh mulch can't mask the stench of entitlement. HOA dues, $150 a month for community standards. Translation, paying some power-hungry Karen to make your life miserable. I'm Army Reserve MP, recently accepted into a federal drug task force. Grandma Rose's house was supposed to be my safety net. Rent it out during deployment, build equity, honor the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 12. That house still smells like her homemade tortillas and Bengay. Every creaky floorboard holds memories of her teaching me right from wrong. Mijo, she'd say, you stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way. Enter Bethany Kensington Wright. Picture a 52-year-old real estate agent who drives a white Lexus SUV and measures grass height with an actual ruler. 7 years as HOA president has turned her into a suburban dictator. Her husband Carl sits on city council, making her feel untouchable. This woman sends violation notices for Christmas lights in January. 2 weeks into my deployment, the email hits my inbox. Violation notice, unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, clearly marked with federal law enforcement decals, was apparently an eyesore. Bethany's interpretation of HOA covenants? Work vehicles prohibited in residential driveways. Here's what she didn't know. That Jeep contains $200,000 worth of surveillance equipment for active cartel investigations. GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, federal property that requires department authorization to relocate. The fine? $50 per day, accumulating while I'm dodging bullets overseas. My sister Maya, sweet middle school teacher Maya, tried reasoning with this suburban tyrant. She drove over to explain I was deployed, showed copies of my orders, even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. Rules are rules, Bethany snapped, looking down at Maya like she was a bug. If your brother cannot follow simple community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family. That phone call from Maya still echoes in my head, the sound of her voice cracking as she sat in Grandma's kitchen. Tank, she threatened to put a lien on the house. She said Carl knows people at the school district that supporting you could affect my job. Maya discovered the pattern. The Johnsons, he's a Marine, got cited for his motorcycle being excessively loud. Sarah Martinez, Navy wife with a deployed husband, was fined for garden gnomes being unprofessional. Every military family in Willowbrook was getting targeted. But here's the kicker. Bethany's violations were made up. I had Maya check the actual HOA bylaws, buried in my grandmother's papers, signed when she bought the house in 1987. Government vehicles were specifically exempted. Emergency services, military, law enforcement, all protected. Bethany was literally fabricating rules, counting on residents being too intimidated or ignorant to check. The community lived in fear. Neighbors whispered over fences but wouldn't speak publicly. Bethany had created a climate where questioning her authority meant becoming her next target. Carl's political connections made opposition seem futile. That's when I realized what I was really dealing with. This wasn't about parking or property values. This was organized harassment of military families by a corrupt HOA board with political protection. The texture of sand between my teeth during that phone call with Maya. The smell of diesel and fear sweat mixing in 120-degree heat. The sound of my grandmother's voice in my memory. Stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. While I was serving overseas keeping drugs off American streets, some suburban princess thought she could steal my family's legacy through fabricated fines and intimidation tactics. Bethany Kensington Wright had just declared war on the wrong federal agent. She thought she was facing some helpless military family. What she didn't realize was that I specialize in dismantling criminal organizations, and her little HOA racket was about to become my next takedown. Bethany's next move came 48 hours later, and it was pure suburban warfare. A registered letter hit Maya's mailbox demanding immediate vehicle removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. Not 48 hours. 24. This woman was trying to steal federal property while I was deployed overseas. The letter, carbon copied to Carl's city council office and the local police, cited immediate health and safety violations and emergency neighborhood degradation. Complete fiction, but wrapped in official letterhead with legal-sounding language designed to intimidate. Maya called me from Grandma's kitchen, and I could hear the panic in her voice mixing with the familiar creak of those old floorboards. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps looking at your Jeep like he's sizing it up." The smell of Grandma's vanilla candles couldn't mask the scent of fear in Maya's voice. This was psychological warfare, suburban style. That's when I unleashed my first counterpunch. I contacted JAG, Judge Advocate General, military lawyers who specialize in eating constitutional violations for breakfast. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams took one look at my case file and her expression went from professional interest to righteous fury. "Rodriguez, this woman just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's not an HOA violation. That's a federal felony." Here's something most people don't know. The Service Members Civil Relief Act doesn't just protect military personnel from contract disputes. It specifically prohibits harassment of deployed service members' property. But more importantly, my Jeep isn't just my vehicle. It's federal law enforcement equipment owned by the United States government. Williams immediately filed a formal complaint with Base Command, triggering something beautiful, a federal military liaison review. Suddenly, Bethany's little power trip was on the radar of people with actual authority. But here's where I discovered the real mini twist. And it made everything personal. Maya started digging through Grandma's old HOA documents, and buried in a stack of meeting minutes from 2019, she found a smoking gun. A letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission, recommending against military housing assistance programs in Willowbrook because transient military populations don't maintain long-term community investment standards. Translation: she'd been trying to keep military families out of our neighborhood for years. The texture of aged paper crumbling between Maya's fingers as she photographed evidence. The sound of her sharp intake of breath when she realized the scope of Bethany's discrimination. "Tank, she's been systematically targeting every military family that moves here. The Hendersons got violations for their son's bike being improperly stored. The Washingtons were cited for excessive noise when their baby cried at night." This wasn't random HOA tyranny. This was organized discrimination with political backing. See, Carl had a development deal pending. Luxury condos requiring HOA approval for zoning variances, military families with their unsightly work vehicles and unpredictable deployment schedules hurt the exclusive community marketing angle. Maya's teacher instincts kicked into overdrive. She started reaching out to other targeted families, building a network of documentation. Every fabricated violation, every threatening letter, every intimidation tactic, she was accidentally building a federal discrimination case. But Bethany escalated again, and this time she crossed a line that would haunt her. The sound of expensive heels clicking on concrete echoed through Maya's phone as Bethany conducted her own property inspection of Grandma's house. She was documenting every detail, photographing my Jeep from multiple angles, measuring distances with a tape measure. "Your brother's military service doesn't excuse community non-compliance," she told Maya with that condescending tone that makes you want to introduce entitlement to reality. "Perhaps your family should consider whether this neighborhood is appropriate for your lifestyle." Code words for, "we don't want your kind here." My counterpunch was swift and devastating. I remotely activated the GPS tracking and security systems in my Jeep, standard equipment for task force operations. The data was beautiful. Bethany had been trespassing on my property 17 times in 3 days, photographing federal law enforcement equipment without authorization. That's not just harassment, that's potential espionage. When my task force supervisor, Captain Sarah Chen, heard that some suburban HOA dictator was surveilling federal drug enforcement equipment and threatening military families, her response was beautifully direct. "Rodriguez, how fast do you want me to make this woman's life complicated?" the federal government was about to introduce Bethany Kensington Wright to consequences she never saw coming. Bethany's next move was pure desperation wrapped in suburban authority, and it nearly destroyed my family. 3 days after my JAG complaint, she hired exec safe security to patrol community standards compliance. 2 guards in a white SUV with security plastered on the sides, documenting my Jeep every hour like it was a terrorist threat. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was what they were telling the neighbors. Maya called me in tears, her voice cracking over satellite connection from some godforsaken desert outpost. "Tank, they're saying you're dangerous, that military vehicles in residential areas create security risks. Mrs. Patterson won't even make eye contact with me anymore." The sound of Maya's sobs mixing with desert wind through my phone made something cold and hard settle in my chest. These bastards were destroying my family's reputation while I couldn't defend them. My counterpunch had to be surgical, but I was 8,000 miles away with limited communication windows. I contacted Captain Chen during my next authorized call window, explaining how private security was surveilling federal task force equipment. Her response wasn't what I expected. "Rodriguez, this is tricky. If we come in too heavy, we validate their claims that your vehicle is dangerous. We need them to hang themselves." The mini twist came when I remotely accessed my Jeep's security system. Federal task force vehicles have more surveillance tech than most police stations. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, GPS tracking, and automatic photography of anyone within 15 feet. The footage revealed something that made my blood run cold. Bethany wasn't just documenting violations. At 1:43 a.m., security footage showed her using a flashlight to examine my Jeep's interior through the windows, photographing dashboard equipment, even attempting to open the doors. She was trying to access classified federal surveillance equipment. But here's what really scared me. She wasn't working alone. The footage showed her pointing out specific features to the security guards who were taking detailed photographs of federal communications equipment. The community dynamics were crumbling, and Maya was paying the price. Parents at her school started questioning whether a military family with security issues should be teaching their children. Her principal called her in for a conversation about community concerns. The smell of chalk dust and fear filled Maya's voice during our next call. "Tank, they're destroying my career." Bethany told the PTA that military families bring instability and security risks to neighborhoods. "She's using my job against me." That's when I realized this wasn't just about my property anymore. They were systematically destroying my family's life, and I was helpless to stop it from overseas. The texture of helplessness tastes like sand and rage, sitting in a communication bunker, surrounded by the machinery of war, while some suburban terrorists dismantled my sister's life back home. Bethany's security guards escalated by approaching Maya directly. The lead guard, some failed cop with a power complex, cornered her while she was getting groceries. "Ma'am, we need to discuss your brother's military activities," he said, blocking her path to her car. "That vehicle contains equipment that could pose risks to community safety. We need to know what kind of operations he might be running from that house." Maya, bless her teacher instincts, started recording on her phone. "Are you suggesting my brother, who's serving overseas protecting our country, is some kind of threat to American families?" she asked, voice steady despite the tremor I could hear. The guard stepped closer. Invasion of personal space designed to intimidate. "Military personnel sometimes bring home problems. PTSD, weapons, surveillance equipment. We're just ensuring community safety." They were painting me as a dangerous, potentially unstable veteran. Classic military discrimination wrapped in community safety language. But Maya's recording captured something beautiful. The guard admitting they were investigating surveillance equipment in my vehicle. That statement just became evidence in a federal espionage case. My counterpunch came through channels Bethany never saw coming. Captain Chen contacted Exec Safe Security's Federal Licensing Bureau, informing them their guards were conducting unauthorized surveillance of classified government equipment. The guards vanished overnight, but their security company now faced federal investigation for espionage activities. Bethany's response to losing her muscle was pure panic. She filed emergency complaints with every agency she could think of: police, fire department, code enforcement, even animal control. But she'd just created a paper trail documenting her obsession with federal property. The war was escalating, and I was still stuck overseas while my family took casualties. But Bethany had no idea she'd just triggered protocols that would bring the full weight of federal law enforcement down on her suburban kingdom. Bethany's desperation reached critical mass at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. and Maya's security camera caught every federal crime in high definition. The sound I'll never forget. Clang, clang, clang. Bolt cutters biting through my security chain, each metallic snap echoing through suburban morning silence like gunshots. Maya's phone buzzing me awake in a deployment tent 8,000 miles away, her voice pure panic. "Tank, she's cutting your locks. She's got bolt cutters and a tow truck, and she's stealing your Jeep right now." Through Maya's phone camera, I watched Bethany Kensington Wright commit multiple federal felonies in real time. Hair disheveled, still in her bathrobe, she'd hired Discount Dave's towing with cash. No paperwork, no questions. And was frantically directing them to load federal law enforcement property onto their flatbed. The tow truck driver took one look at the federal task force decals and started backing away like the vehicle was radioactive. "Lady, this is government property with federal markings. I ain't touching this for any amount of money." "It's abandoned property," Bethany screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria, spittle flying in the morning air. "I'm HOA president with legal authority to remove community violations." That statement, captured on 3 different security cameras, just became Exhibit A in a federal theft case. My counterpunch was swift and devastating. I immediately contacted Captain Chen through emergency channels, triggering protocols for theft of federal law enforcement equipment. Within minutes, federal marshals were dispatched with lights and sirens to my grandmother's address. But here's the beautiful mini twist. My Jeep's hidden GPS tracker and remote security systems were documenting everything automatically. Federal task force vehicles have kill switches, tracking devices, and cameras that activate when unauthorized movement is detected. The moment Bethany cut my lock, she triggered a federal alert system that pinged Homeland Security databases across 3 states. Maya kept recording when Bethany made her fatal mistake. After the tow truck driver fled, leaving tire marks on the asphalt in his haste to escape, she changed the locks on the community gate, effectively imprisoning my federal vehicle and blocking law enforcement access. "If he wants his precious military truck back, he can follow proper HOA procedures," she shrieked at Maya, waving the new keys like some demented suburban warlord. "Military service doesn't make him above community standards." The texture of helpless rage coursed through my veins as I watched this entitled suburbanite steal federal property while my sister stood recording her meltdown. The smell of diesel fuel and fear sweat seemed to transmit through the phone connection. Knowledge nugget. Federal task force vehicles contain automatic tracking and alert systems that activate during unauthorized tampering. Cutting locks or attempting to move these vehicles triggers Homeland Security protocols, GPS tracking, and federal response teams. This isn't local crime. It's theft of classified government equipment with terrorism enhancement potential. Takeaway. Stealing federal law enforcement vehicles triggers automatic national security alerts and federal task force response. It's not theft, it's potential terrorism. The community uprising began when Mrs. Patterson witnessed Bethany's public breakdown from her front window. This sweet elderly woman who'd survived the Great Depression and buried 2 military sons wasn't about to watch some HOA Karen terrorize a deployed soldier's family. She called every neighbor, every veteran in Willowbrook, every decent person who'd been silently suffering under Bethany's reign of suburban terror. By 10 a.m., my grandmother's house was surrounded by protective neighbors forming a human shield around federal property. "This stops right here, right now," declared Tom Henderson, 72-year-old Vietnam vet whose own son had done 3 tours in Afghanistan. "You want that boy's vehicle, you go through 30 American veterans first." Maya's voice was stronger when she called me back, supported by a wall of community solidarity that made my throat tight with gratitude. "Tank, you should see this. The whole neighborhood is here. Mr. Henderson brought his American flag. Mrs. Chen is making coffee for everyone. They're not leaving." But Bethany's response to community resistance was pure suburban fascism cranked to 11. She filed emergency complaints with every government agency in the phone book. Police, claiming veterans were forming armed militias. Fire department, alleging explosive hazards from military equipment. Code enforcement, fabricating violations about unauthorized assemblies. Even animal control, claiming emotional support dogs were attack animals.